I needed to find something in my life to find meaning after I left the military. You got that big void, and little did I know it was going to be called to coaching. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about football. I didn't really care about anything in football. It was all about the development of these young men, because I didn't have anybody in my life when I was growing up, and that sucked. And I didn't want these guys growing up in the town that I grew up in and the school that I went to and be lost.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Coach Joe Kennedy. You may remember him from choosing to pray with his football team and getting into some trouble with that and then getting out of it. How's it going?
It's good.
I try to be concise in my delivery there.
I like it.
Yeah. So before we get into all the details here, let's talk about you for a minute. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bremerton, Washington, kind of a Navy town, which made me, have that rough background with a blue-collar town. So, yeah, born and raised there, and then went into the Marine Corps after I turned 18.
What'd you do in the Marine Corps?
I started out as a 3521 mechanic, diesel mechanic, and I had a natural gift for training, so I became the training guide for many years and ended up as a company gunny at my last unit.
You said 35 what?
21.
3521. I'm not familiar with that. What unit were you in? Like, where were you stationed?
A lot of artillery. I was with 311, 12th Marines, usually with 1st Marine Division. Never really went to the air wing or anything, but Camp Pendleton, Twin Amp Bombs, Okinawa, mainland Japan, did a stint in recruiting. So, yeah.
What made you decide to join the military?
I needed something. I was a pretty troubled youth. I was on the wrong path. Everybody told me that when I was growing up, that only thing I brought was pain and suffering everywhere I went. And I didn't want to be defined by my past. And I was headed down that road. I knew I wanted to belong to something more than myself. And the Marine Corps seemed like the perfect fit because I get to fight for a living and I'm just naturally gifted at that. And I found my calling and really my love for our country.
Mm-hmm. And what did that look like for you, the love for the country? I mean, you say you grew up troubled. There's some, and certainly you developed more about this later on in your life, becoming a coach and everything. But we've got a big problem in America with, I guess you could call it undisciplined aggression amongst our youth, young males especially. And it's always a problem, right? I mean, men aren't meant to be emotional. We have too much strength and too much aggression to be emotional. We have to be more logical. It's just the way we're designed. But we've got a lot of emotional young men out there now doing dumb shit, frankly. And you don't have any parents or men involved in their lives. You and I grew up that way too. Even with men in your life, sometimes it could be, if you don't find a purpose for yourself or an outlet for that aggression, then it can become annoying at first, right? To a lot of people, I guess, like small level trouble, just like not on the right path, doing the right things, and it can gradually become violent in a lot of ways. And then, on the other side of that, it can also become a problem for you personally, because when there's not an outlet for that and you don't find outlets for aggression and violence, a lot of times it'll turn inward on you and you can, start to suffer from severe depression and shit like that. So,
absolutely.
Speak to that a little bit about what it was like in high school versus what it was like in the Marine Corps, and how you found your purpose, came to terms, I guess, with your skill set, as you mentioned before, about being a leader, a communicator, all this stuff.
Yeah, well, when I was in school, I got kicked out of every school, mostly for fighting. And probably fighting was the number one thing. And I got kicked out of every school I've ever been to. I think I went to 13 different schools out of the 12 years I attended school. I Was in and out of group homes, foster homes, boys' homes, and I was very self-destructive. Not just destructive to the people around me, but also was destroying myself. Friday nights or Saturday mornings, wake up and I'm locked up. That's not a cool way to be. I was homeless at times, and I didn't have any place to call my home, and I just was angry. I was a very angry kid. And when the Marine Corps came around, it just kind of put things into perspective. I became something more than myself. I learned a discipline for dang sure, and I really needed that. The Constitution actually meant something to me, and I found my love for America. And I didn't have that before because I didn't have anybody directing me in the way I needed to go as a kid.
Yeah, it's interesting because young men, we thrive when we've got, well, not just young men of all ages thrive when we have a purpose, and that purpose is always something beyond ourselves, right? You mentioned patriotism, you mentioned the Constitution, but patriotism is certainly one of those things, and I think we've really done our male youth quite a disservice in not enabling that more in people, and not just blind patriotism, not just you should care about your country and blah blah blah, and you should certainly, but giving them the historical and philosophical background for why that stuff is important. You know what I mean? Like deep roots in the idea of American patriotism, I think, is something that could save a lot of people, frankly, and also has the downstream benefit of making our country better.
Oh, I totally agree. Especially if you take a look at the way the country is today. Our youth are running around undisciplined. Parents are trying to be friends. Schools are influencing our youth more than the family is, and we're a mess. And this whole toxic masculinity is just, I mean, it pisses me off because we are males. We're not made to be females, and somehow we've forgotten that.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't understand. I really don't understand how we've allowed this to happen. I understand why somebody would do it, and the same reason that if you were fighting a siege war and you had access to the enemy's water supply, you would poison the water supply. And back then, they would just kill animals and throw decrepit animals in there and let them, poison the water supply. And in a lot of ways, a healthy masculine presence in a culture is something that protects us from existential threats, right? I mean, that's kind of how we're designed as human beings, and not just human beings, but mammals of all types. As a matter of fact, maybe males and other groups as well. And it makes sense why somebody would do that, because they're trying to destroy you, right? What doesn't make sense to me is how easily we've been duped into accepting that stuff.
Oh yeah, that's what I don't understand is where did the males go? Where did all the men go in our country? I know they fought in World War I, World War II. We started breaking them down in Korea and Vietnam, and now we're just used and abused, and we let it all happen on our watch. I mean, we're the ones that have to take the fall for that because it was on our watch while it happened.
And I suppose the good news is that it's a fixable problem, right? Like we can turn this stuff around. Yeah, we do a lot of complaining, these days. If you pay attention to social media, a lot of people are complaining about how there's no men anymore and blah 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 and this and that. We've got a problem with our youth. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, how many of you are actually talking to kids then? Like if there's such a problem with masculinity and youth, where are you exactly in that equation? Are you just somebody over there running your mouth, or are you actually doing something about it? And there's a lot of ways to do that. Have children yourself is certainly one of those ways. Coach sports as you're doing. I mean, I think it's interesting how this is especially true for men, that we find our pathway to I guess fixing what's wrong with us by helping other people typically, right? I mean, that seems to be usually how it works. And I wonder if that was your experience. So you were in the Marine Corps, you were a gunnery sergeant. How long were you in?
Right. I retired at 20 years.
Okay. So you were 20 years there, and then you became a football coach later?
Yeah, and that was before I found I got married to my wife, and women have a way of changing your life trajectory. Instant family. She had 3 kids, and yeah, I needed to find something in my life to find meaning after I left the military. You got that big void, and little did I know it was going to be called to coaching, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about football. I didn't really care about anything in football. It was all about the development of these young men, because I didn't have anybody in my life when I was growing up, and that sucked. And I didn't want these guys growing up in the town that I grew up in and the school that I went to and be lost in the crowd like I was. I wanted to step in that gap, especially with the single families that are in there in military town. I wanted to make a difference, and I didn't know how I was going to do that until God called me to coach, and man, put me on that path.
So you, would you say you learned football on the job?
I didn't even learn football, I'll tell you the truth. I didn't care about football. I cared about the guys that were doing the X's and O's. We had so many coaches that were, phenomenal. We had guys that played for the NFL, a lot of college ball. One guy who was even in the Super Bowl. So we had the X's and O's covered in spades, but we didn't have anybody that really cared about just the kids and the families and all the problems these guys are going through. So that was mine. I was the development coach to be there for those kids and teach them how to be better young men and getting the most out of them on the football field. And the same with our coaches, is to make them better coaches.
That seems like something, and maybe this exists, I'm not familiar with it, but this kind of seems like something that universities could use, frankly.
Yeah, a lot of universities. I know all the professional sports have them. Some of the bigger programs like Alabama and big ones in the SEC, they have a lot of development coach. They have guys that are religious coaches and stuff for them. So their chaplains are out there, but there's a huge void, an extremely huge void. Everybody gets focused on winning instead of what happens to those guys at the next level, or when their career's over, where did they go from there?
Yeah, so how did you approach it then? I guess, how do you communicate that to a guy who's, I guess, from maybe a very disparate background than you had, but that looks like a hurdle to a lot of people, but having been an NCO in the military, that's nothing, right? It's like, you just have to find, in marketing, we call it affinity-based marketing. Like, it's the juncture of two things that you like, and you just put those together, right? But in this case, it's like you just find common experience. Like, yeah, I was a dumbass when I was in high school too, but here's what could have happened to me, and here's how I found my way out of it. What was your approach like, or what is, rather? I guess you're still doing this. What's your approach like with a new kid? Like, how establish a rapport? How do you go about that?
Yeah, first I really examine each kid. It's none of them are the same. We know some kids respond good to being in their face, and other ones sometimes just need a hug. There's no two kids the same, but they all want the same thing. They all want that discipline. They want to be part of the team, and they want to belong. And I just pick out what the things that they need to work on, and really listen to them and find out what they need and be there for them. And I'd be the first one to get into their asses. And they never wanted to let me down or piss me off. Even though the other coaches would yell and scream, I didn't have to do that. I could even just look at them. And, when you had a PFC that was out of line in a formation, you just give them that look, and they understand it. So it's like building a whole platoon of guys. That's what you do, is build that team discipline.
Yeah, I think we talk about discipline a lot these days, but there is no discipline without consequences, right? And I think that's
amen.
Yeah, what's that?
Amen. That's the thing, is that we don't have consequences these days, and everything that these guys did, good or bad, had consequences to them, and they had to pay both of them. Sometimes it was really painful to them, but other times it was great reward. But there's always got to be accountability for every one of your actions.
So how do you, I guess, just right out of the gate, set the tone for that stuff, because there's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people talk. There's a lot of self-help gurus telling you how to live your life and shit like that. But I think they're all kind of. To me, it's like going to business school. I spent a little bit of time at business school, and as soon as I realized nobody talking to me had ever run a successful business before, I left, because that's what the hell you've been talking about. I can read this stuff in a book. I don't need to listen to you talk for $4,000 a credit hour or whatever it was. Kids are very, I wouldn't say nihilistic, but they're very skeptical these days. You know what I mean? There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people that are full of shit trying to talk to them. And then, you're just a punk kid anyways, right? Just like you and I were back in the day. And it's like, you don't know anything. Because you're old, you know stuff? Like, yeah, actually that is kind of how it works. But like, how do you establish, I guess, the tone for that? Like, how do you get from zero to the point where the kid is practicing not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and you give him a look and he knows what he's supposed to be doing? Like, how do you get from point A to point B there?
Right. I just started out by setting the ground rules at first. This is what it is. You would say yes, coach, or no, coach. It was the simplest thing. Instead of them going yeah or whatever or no, I made them address the authority of a coach every single time. And with their parents, I made them respect all of their parents. If a kid got out of line, his mom would call me, and I'd stop the football game right in the middle of the football game, pull that kid out, make him do jumping jacks, and saying, "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you, Mom." If they lost their shit on the field, I would stop and I would go out there. We'd do push-ups together. Every single thing always had a reaction to, or there's some kind of consequence for it. They wanted to be on the good side of things. If you constantly beat a kid, he's obviously not going to do well. But if you hold them accountable and really want them to take pride in this, the self-reliance, self-assurance that they get belonging to a team, and putting them in leadership, making them responsible for different things on the team. I mean, there's a million different ways to get a kid started. And once you just get them hooked into it, then you can start have the building blocks from there.
Sure, yeah. And I suppose a big part of this is, as you said before, establishing a set of consequences. You know what I mean? And this is, by the way, the same way we train dogs. It's the same way we raise children, like literally. Like, that's hot, don't touch it. Right. And what happens? You establish. But
they got to touch it sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to let them make a mistake. Yeah. And it's like,
absolutely.
Okay. Now you know that it's hot. Now you know for sure that it's hot. And how do I capitalize on that? How do I take the momentum from the lesson you just learned in a very visceral way and turn that into, lessons B, C, and D afterwards? It's like, okay, now you see that there are consequences to this. Here are some other things that can go wrong. Here are some things that can go very right. You know what I mean? If you choose to do the right thing. And sports, it's kind of easy in sports, to be honest. I think more so than other parts of life, because practice is practice, but there's going to be a game, and success on the field is that's a pretty good consequence, right? And it's very obvious, and it doesn't necessarily have to be their own success. But look how hard Johnny was working, and now look how well he did on the field this week. You have that capability. All you have to do is work like he did.
Oh yeah, and
you know what I mean.
And also calling out the ones that aren't, and stopping everything to let people know that this is the right way to do things. These are the wrong ways to do things. I call everybody out in both good and bad. So you have that good balance between, like you said, behavioral discipline is really what you're working for, to get them into the mindset of doing the right thing at all times. And I think it kind of sets the pace for them for their lives.
Yeah, 100%. And then, another great thing about team sports specifically is that people, especially young men, learn to have to count on each other, right? Which is, there's a lot going on there. One, it's difficult for men to ask for help, usually, especially when they're in an aggressive mode. But people that have been in the military know what that looks like, right? So it kind of breaks that wall down, that ego wall down a little bit. So you're like, okay, I know that I have to depend on these people. And then on the other side of that, at some point, if you're doing it right, you realize, oh shit, these people are also depending on me. And that becomes the thing that scares you most. Like when I was in war, I never cared about dying. That didn't bother me because you can't control that
Absolutely.
shit. But I was very not afraid, but I was very anxious about letting people down around me, right? Like that became the thing that drove me over there is like, I'm not gonna, like we've all got to carry the log here. You know what I mean? Like there's no, that you can't let up ever because you're gonna, so like there's real consequences here. I think those are really good lessons for young men to learn.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of that has to do with the team building that you do. It's not individual. It's not even like an individual sport like wrestling or boxing or something. It's when you're on a team. I mean, we do the log carries, we do the tire carries with the whole entire team. And if one person pays, then a lot of times it's all the people pay because we want them all marching to the same set of music. And yeah, it's tough, especially when you're trying to not let the team down. That's huge. And I always worried about losing somebody, in combat too. But I had that really good feeling that the guy in left and right of me, they felt the same way. And that's what I always wanted to build, is have that team concept where they weren't looking at themselves anymore. They were looking at the bigger picture and be part of something where the guy on the left and right depend on him all the time.
Yeah. And then you start to use your, like all of these things that we associate with negativity, ego, and thinking about yourself and all this stuff. All of those things then become a function of being a better member of the team, right? Which is kind of how we're built. So instead of obsessing about being great at something because you want to be the best for yourself and all that stuff, or even that you think you're better than everyone else, now you're trying to be your best for other people. And I think that's something that makes you a better man in general. I mean, it's going to make you a better husband, father, all this stuff. It'll have downstream effects into perpetuity. And
when you're looking, you got to look beyond yourself, because we really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but we can have a huge impact on those around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, if you do that stuff, you're naturally going to surround yourself with people who are like that as well. And the effect is going to be that you get, like, it does help you, right? It does help you just indirectly, I suppose. And the other part of that is people are obsessed with self-care these days. I mean, you live in the Pacific Northwest. It's nothing but not nothing but there's a lot of completely useless, self-centered people up there. And that's not what that is designed for. That instinct in human beings to take care of themselves, to be the best they can be, it's not designed so that you can thrive as an individual, right? That's just not how it works. We're communal animals. And it's a tough lesson for people to learn. Say that again?
I don't know how we broke that down. I mean, you look at the way the West was won, and these were the Cowboys and the Lumberjacks. These were the toughest guys in the world.
Your audio just got weird. I can't hear you very well now.
Oh, let me fix that.
Where is that? 23.
I don't know what worked.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, we tried to use a second earpiece. It didn't work so good.
Yeah, no worries. That's good now.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just saying that, the way the West was won was the toughest people moved west, and you had these survivors that were eking out a living trying to come over to the West Coast. Lumberjacks, hunters, wild men that they grew up there, and now all of a sudden it's nothing but tree huggers left. The whole left coast is completely insane, and men, especially there, have forgotten what it means to be a man and have been neutered, especially on the East Coast, just out of I don't know, peer pressure or media. I don't know what does it, but it's sad.
Do you find that that's made your job more difficult over the years, both as an NCO in the Marine Corps and now as a coach? Have you noticed that the men upon entry they need a little bit more help getting to where they need to be?
Yeah, they're a lot softer now. When I was a kid, I was just a dumb kid, but I was tough. The kids around me were tough. We had things we had to do for work, and to do things in our lives. We'd play outside even, and we'd have sports on our own. And we just had a community that we functioned together. Now it's, I up in Washington, we got a lot of moms that are trying to raise these single families, and they're doing the best they can, but they don't know what it means to be a man. They don't know how to raise a man. And they've gotten really soft. It's so much easier to give a kid a phone or a tablet and have them play Xbox than to get outside off their butt and go do something, be physical. So we're dealing with not just the mental aspects of it, but physically we've gotten weak as a society. We've got fat, dumb, and happy.
Yeah. So what are the new challenges now that you see, like different? What year did you start coaching?
I started in 2008.
Okay.
And I got fired in 2015.
And 2008 versus today, what would you say are the differences for the young men that are coming into programs?
Well, number one, we don't have as many men showing up. These kids don't even want to go. Why would I want to go play football? It's hard work. It's tough. I don't even have kids wanting to show up or to even try out for team sports. And I think that's probably the number one thing that I've noticed the difference since we were kids to when I started coaching is that every year it gets worse and worse. And you got these, I hate to say it, a lot of the smaller kids are the fighters that are always trying to make something of themselves. You get these big gorilla kids and they're just big soft doughboys. So getting people off their butts and doing something, being active and working hard for something, it's just not in their blood these days. And as a society, that's what I think we really need to be working on is get back to some kind of physical requirements for our youth in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they don't even have to do PE anymore. It's just sad.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, there was this. I remember seeing it on television. Arnold Schwarzenegger ran the Presidential Fitness, whatever the hell it was. I don't remember, but
yeah,
I don't even know who would do that these days. I guess it would have to be an athlete because it certainly wouldn't be a celebrity doing that. I mean, there's no one acting today that's like Arnold Schwarzenegger was back then. Maybe Chris Pratt, I guess. He would be all right at doing that. It's just we live in a very different world. So, that's the thing though. 1,000 years ago, if you were in a drought season, you had to do a better job of taking care of your water, right? Because you need it. Those are just circumstances and conditions. We just have, like, people think a lot of these things as insurmountable problems now. It's like, no, it's just a different set of circumstances, right? I mean, you've got to be anti-fragile. You have to be resilient. That's the best trait you can have, evolutionarily speaking, is resilience. And not taking challenges or shying away from hard things is the opposite of that, right? I mean, that's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. A lot of that used to be off of necessity, and now we have such a squishy, easy society that we don't have to really work hard. And it's not until something bad happens where we actually got to respond to that. And there's that old saying about, that hard times make strong men, and then the opposite goes when it's good, it makes weak men. And that's exactly where we are as a society, is that things have gotten too lax, too easy, and we don't have to work for anything anymore. And it bugs me because that's not the way I want to raise my kids, not the way I want to coach, not the way I want to be a husband or a leader for my family and my community.
Yeah, and you are someone who, I guess, is known for doing what you think is right. Tell me about the situation that happened at Bremerton High School.
Yeah, well, I prayed after every game, win or lose, from the get-go. That was my covenant with God before I even started coaching. And I did this for 8 years, twice a week, Mondays and Fridays after each game, varsity and junior varsity. It was never a big deal. Sometimes the kids wanted to come out. Sometimes they didn't. I didn't really care because it was my thing. But it kind of grew, and kids became better sportsmen, showing sportsmanship. if they, after a game, they just get kind of fight. They've been fighting these guys for 48 minutes and beating the crap out of each other. Now they're all coming together and can put that on pause and be able to shake the guy's hand and be good sportsmen about it. Good winners and good losers. So I was fired in my 8th year because they said I was not to pray with the kids anymore. And I said, well, that's unfortunate, but hey, your school, your rules. So I went back to just praying by myself. And just because people could see me still out there doing this, they said, you need to choose between your faith and your job. And that's what set me off as an American, because I was an American before I became a follower of the Lord. Mm-hmm. So it really pissed me off as an American that somebody would lose their job and their First Amendment rights over something so trivial as being seen in public doing something. And I was going to die on that hill. It was worth losing everything for, because that's how much I believed in doing what's right. It could cost you everything, but what would have been the alternative? I mean, giving in and setting a bad example for these guys, there was no way that was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the First Amendment's pretty clear on that, right? I mean, you're prohibit the exercise thereof is the last part of that sentence on the Establishment Clause. It's like, okay, yeah, the government can't establish a religion. It also can't interfere with people that are participating in their religion, provided they're not breaking laws or whatever. It's an odd thing to get mad about. Not shocking that it happened in that area of the country, frankly. But I do wonder how spiritually insecure I'm not religious myself, but I wonder how spiritually insecure someone might have to be that upset that somebody else is practicing their faith in public. Like, just maybe relax, dude. Go kick your hacky sack around or whatever the fuck you people do, and mind your business. It's so odd to me that would even be a gripe. What the hell? What do you got going on in your life? Like, are your cats at home not tended to now, or that seems like a single cat lady complaint to me, frankly.
Oh, and that's the way it started. It was one lady who had at the school that had a problem with it, and just with those little squeaky wheels are the ones that everybody listened to, and we bowed down because of this one person. When you're in the majority, you should be able to stand up and say this is crap. But obviously, we're not even doing that. It's so much easier to remove any kind of hindrance because they want us to be accommodating. And I'm not doing that. I don't back down to something and give in to somebody because they're not comfortable with it. I mean, I would kill or die for somebody's right to practice Hinduism or to be a Muslim, or as much as it would be to a Christian, or even not have religion. It makes absolutely no difference here in America. Everybody has the same freaking rights. Nobody's special. And I will fight and die for that.
Yeah, so the case, this is 2015, and it took 7 years to adjudicate this. I mean, that's a long time.
Oh, dude, it was so long. We lost 7 times at the lower courts. And the biggest thing that bothered me was at the lower courts, they said any demonstration of faith in the public square could get you terminated. And if that would have stood, I would have screwed up the First Amendment for all Americans. That was my biggest weight. I wasn't worried about winning. I was worried what happens if I end up losing. And the way that they're ruling right now, that would stick. So I had to take this to the final, till there was nothing left. I had to just keep fighting and get up every day going, yeah, here's another day of the grind. And it took 7 years of legal battles, and it took me 9 football seasons to get back onto the field. But it was absolutely 100% worth it because I knew I was right. I was doing what was right. And I set the example for everybody in America that sometimes it does cause pain and might take a long time to do. But those are the best things that are worth. You have that sense of accomplishment afterwards because you knew you could hang through all of it.
What was the final decision from the Supreme Court on that? Like, what's the language they used, I guess?
Yeah, so they granted me summary judgment, which just means what did I ask for? And I asked for my job back, to be reinstated as a coach, and to be able to exercise my rights as an American by praying on a football field. They granted me that. Now, the great thing they did is they took it a step further because back in the day there was this old case which really screwed up America and in our religious freedoms, and it made everything all murky. Well, they overturned this old case law, which has 7,000 different cases in it that have taken away religious liberties from Americans. It overturned that, and one of the Supreme Court guys, he said it so perfectly that the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of religion, the free exercise, they all work in parallel. They work together. They're not opposing forces like this old case law was. So we have more religious freedom now here in America than you and I have had in the past 50, I think like 53 years. And we have our freedoms back. The person is alive and well, and we need to exercise that or we'll lose it again.
And what was it like walking back out onto the field after all this? It must have been a moment, I guess, for you.
Yeah, well, I tell you, it was pretty scary actually. I was so nervous about even walking back into the school and showing up at the front desk and, hey, here I am. I want my reinstatement letter. I had to go face the giant. That's not a fun thing to do. Is go back to your old job that you got fired from, because they're not going to receive me with open arms. But it was something that had to be done. And walking out there onto the 50-yard line and not showing any of that fear and going and exercising those rights, it was something I think had to be done. And it felt so good after I did it. There's that whole workup and nervousness beforehand. But afterwards, man, I did it. We won this fight. We fought the good fight. We finished the race, and we remained faithful the whole way through.
And now you've got a book, Average Joe, the inspirational true story of Coach Joe Kennedy, but also there's a film coming as well, as you can see in the background there. Tell me about that. How did you get hooked up with this in the first place? Because I see it's from the producers of God's Not Dead, which is I believe our buddy Kevin Sorbo was starred in that, if I'm not mistaken. So tell me about Average Joe, the film.
Well, the film was somebody's. It was their imagination at first. They heard what my story and my testimony, the background I went through, and they said, wow, this is actually an underdog story, and it's inspiring to see somebody stand up for something, for such a simple thing in our society today, which has huge ramifications. And I stood firm in that. And the guy was so impressed by it. He said, man, this sounds like a movie. We need good movies to inspire people and to encourage people here these days. And it took 8 years to make it come to fruition, but that's what we did. We put it all together, and I didn't want it to be a cheesy film. I wanted it to be really good. I didn't want it to be a uber religious film either, because I'm not super religious. I just trying to love God and love others, and I suck at that every day. But it shows all the dirty nitty gritty of life, of growing up in a crappy environment, serving in combat in the Marine Corps, and then learning all that discipline and going through those hard times, and then putting my wife through 8 years of legal battles. And she was the HR director for the school district that fired me. So I had essentially was suing my wife. And so we wanted to inspire people on this. And that's exactly what I think this movie does. It's very well done. And it is, I think people are going to walk out of there inspired, ready, like a Rocky movie, ready to take on the world when they step out of there.
Well, you might be the first guy in human history to sue their wife and stay married, frankly. That's a story all on its own.
I don't recommend that either. Don't do that.
That must have been pretty stressful. She must be a pretty special lady to have put up with all this nonsense for 8 years.
She is incredible, yes.
And she's still in the position or something similar now?
No, we actually both resigned our jobs. She stayed another 5 years in the HR position while we were going through our lawsuits, but we both resigned our positions and actually moved down to Pensacola, Florida a couple years ago to take care of my wife's dad. So we're taking care of an ailing family member right now.
I see. Okay, great. Well, look, I know you've got you got to get out of here. You got other stuff to do today. Tell everybody where the film's going to be released. I know I'm guessing it's a limited release. It's on October 11th, which is 8 days from today. And
right, and it's not limited. It's actually being released nationwide. And you go to averagejoemovie.com. I know it's not very original, but it's super simple. averagejoemovie.com, and you can put in your zip code to show you where it's playing. But it will be nationwide. And man, I want to flood that market that's showing that if idiots like me could do this, imagine what the rest of us could do.
Yeah, good. averagejoemovie.com. That's, by the way, simple's better. People are dumb and they'll forget how to put stuff in. I do all the time. My co-host on the other show can't even pronounce your name probably, and it's the simplest name of all time. And then the book,
brothers.
Yeah, you might be. The book, again, Average Joe, One Man's Faith and the Fight to Change a Nation, is on Amazon and pretty much everywhere else you can find books, I would imagine. Did you do an audiobook for this, or is it just paperback or hardback?
Yeah, we did an audio book too, so it's hardback and audio.
All right, great. So all the options out there. Check out Joe's story. Thanks for coming today, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate it, brother.
Yes, sir. You guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.